source of the changes, where the changes are likely to come from on your project, and some tips and messages on how to manage those changes. My background, I own offshore engineering. I specialise in either managing complex projects or recovering projects that got into trouble. After many consultants have been in giving big reports and still can't solve the problem. So my experience, particularly in the last 15 years, has been recovering complex construction projects that have failed or close to failing and bringing them back sometimes. And you can imagine the challenges that are faced in those sort of environments when people work hard on a project and the thing is failing, the rivalry's low, you've got to go, someone like me has to go into some bad news and fix the problem. And to date, I've been able to fix all of them, but it's been some exciting challenges there, which is the background to this presentation. I'm also Thailand's head national coach for field hockey, both men and women. I've coached Thailand's national teams in the last 7 years, off and on, as a volunteer. So I pay my bills from working as a project consultant and as a hobby coach the national hockey team. Valid? Cannot hear me? Who cannot hear me? Can you hear me at the back? Okay. From that experience in coaching the national hockey team in Thailand, I also coached at a high level in Australia, but coaching the national teams in Thailand has given me an insight into the potential and really the untapped potential of what's available here in Thailand. Once the Thai people are confident with the people that come from overseas to work with them, they're amazing what they can achieve. And the people, and this is a message for people that are not from Thailand, when you're in Thailand, try to understand how the Thai people think and feel, and you'll be amazed at what they can achieve. But if you can't step outside of your comfort zone and work with the Thai people, you will waste a lot of time and a lot of resources. So never underestimate what the Thai people can achieve. And the reverse message for the Thai people is try to step a little bit outside and understand that people coming from overseas come from different cultures. They don't always understand the way that they think and feel. And the people from Australia will relate to the Thai people different from people from America, different from people from Japan. I don't have time to teach all that today, but I have taught that in recent weeks. It's a completely different environment. Two things: source of change, manage change, and then some questions. The part one, source of change. The message. As a project manager, you have to deal with many stakeholders, what I call stakeholders in the project. They start with who owns the project. Project team, internal stakeholders, so that's the people inside your own organisation that you don't have control over, that can influence changes on the project. External stakeholders, contractors and subcontractors that you're managing, and unforeseen events. So your own team that reports to you can include these people. They can be a source of change because they can see something in the specification that needs to happen or a contract that requires a change. The important message in all of this is that you need to be prepared as a project manager to deal with things that will come out of left field that you're not expecting, and they can come from many sources. But you need to set your project up and your contract up so that you can deal and cope with those. Most of those surprises that will come. Basically, in the project team, it's anybody that reports to you. So the next source of change, for instance, internal stakeholders. They can come from your bosses, from your peers, engineers who always want to make the perfect project but don't understand time and cost. Staff personnel, maintenance people can have some really good ideas about how to improve something. But to say that my experience is in construction, very big construction projects, not IT, although I've got some experience in managing, developing software systems for naval warfare. So all those people within your own organisation, like the operating environment for what the project intention is, what the purpose of the project is, if you're going to use that project. So they're normally employed by the owner of the project. another source of change are the contractors, subcontractors, suppliers that work for you. Normally managed by yourself as a project manager or people that report to you. And for any number of reasons, changes can come from these people. And external stakeholders, lots of changes come from these people. So your governments, can be an insurance requirement that's changed, can be a financing requirement that changes, can have an enormous impact on the project. Special interest groups. If you're dealing, I consult on sorry about that, I don't know what to call it. Special interest groups. I consult on electrical infrastructure projects. And when a new substation is going into a particular area in Australia, there can be people that are upset, don't understand the benefit that a power station or a substation will bring to that area. They just see their environment changing. Now, as a project manager, you need to be able to deal with those sort of people. They might have a minor impact financially on the project, but they have the potential to stop a project. You need to be aware of that, and you as the project manager have to deal with that situation. You can't always find the answer, but you need to know who to talk to help you solve those problems. But they can have an enormous disruption, enormous impact on your project. So they form what I call the external environment on the project. So the internal environment is in your own organisation, formed by your project team and the people that don't report to you. And then you have an external environment that all of these factors can come from. So you start to see that changes on a project can come from many different sources. But you're the one person as a project manager who must solve them, must find the answers to how to deal with these problems. Who's going to pay for the change? What impact on the project? And then you've got unforeseen events. Things like natural disasters, disrupted your project. How do you address that? Things like civil unrest, terrorism, war. Some of these you can insure it, but when you're starting your project, you need to be sure how you're going to deal with some of these problems if they occur. What does the insurance policy cover? You need to have a relationship with the insurance broker, your insurance agent, to make sure that they can provide those answers quickly for you so that you know how to manage those situations and what's not covered, so that you have another fallback alternative to cover it if the situation does arise. So it's not easy managing these projects, but I've got to say in 30 years I have a lot of scar tissue, what we call in Australia scar tissue, and these problems can occur on any project and can often be unanticipated. So the impact of changes, let's go. First of all, the change will certainly involve extra money, almost certainly will involve extra money, and often can have an impact on delaying the project. Very few changes make a project happen faster. Most of them involve a delay on the project. And you have to work out an answer whether you can accommodate that within your existing schedule, or how you're going to deal with the delay on the project. Funding, performance requirements, absolutely critical. I cannot overemphasize it. You have to be sure that when a change comes onto your project, that it will not affect how the performance of that project will occur again. In other words, there is a very strong link between the original requirements and what you test at the end, and any changes that come into the project through the life of the project, what impact that has on the eventual performance of the project, and how you will test that. That's particularly important in IT, but just as important in a construction project. Risks. And a lot of people will have a risk management plan, risk mitigation strategies. You put a particular change into a project, that can change the risk profile substantially. Business opportunities. Some of them will give you increased opportunities, some will reduce the opportunities. And almost certainly, almost any change put in a project introduces another level of uncertainty into the project. Can you complete it in time? Can you complete it at cost? Will it work? And this is a major source and can cause an enormous amount of problem in the project. Misunderstandings between stakeholders. An owner wants a bigger building, wants a contractor to do it. The contractor wants a lot of money to make the building bigger. Very simple solution. Very simple problem. So the owner doesn't want to pay too much money for it. The contractor obviously wants to make sure that when he does that extra work, he's going to get, not going to lose money on it. So that straight away you have a conflict situation. As a project manager, you have to know how to solve that problem. And sometimes the message isn't the message you have to give to one of those stakeholders isn't very good. So how do you manage all of these changes? First thing, let's look in very simple terms. The project management job is very complex and you have to deal with a lot of issues, but you can bring it down to very basic level. First thing is that you must plan. Don't just assume your planner that works for you is going to do it all. You have to have a clear picture how you're getting from this point on the project to the end of the project as the manager. As the project manager, that is your job. I work often as a project director, and that's one of the first things I'll say to a project manager. Explain to me in very simple terms how you're getting from this point to this point, and what are the problems through there that you anticipate. At a high level, I want to see it on a high level. And I'm not interested in 50 pages of a Gantt chart coming in a Primavera or whatever or Microsoft project where it is. I want to see it on one page. I want you to show me. Take all the computer stuff, I'm not interested in that. You show me in your own words how you're getting from this point to this point. Project manager can't do that. I send one and say, sit down and think about it. I want to see in 2 days' time you can plan clearly thought out how you're getting from here to here and what the problems are. You have to be able to do that. As a project manager, you're the one in control. You have to be able to explain it to your boss, to the directors if they call you into a board meeting to explain the project, or even to contractors and people that work for you. You have to have a clear picture of where your project is. Absolutely fundamental. The next is this. Okay, sound better?
Yep.
Okay. The next part of your job is organising. So once you've got a clear plan, then you have to organise your resources and how you're doing your activities to suit that plan. And that includes directing people. Then you need to control and monitor. And the last one is, in some texts, is budget. I include the budget in those areas above in part of the planning function and the organising function, but some texts and some teachers treat it separately, so I'll leave that to your judgment. But those are the fundamental jobs that you have to do. Now you can split that down to many jobs, but you must go through those steps. You must have the ability to plan, you must have the ability to organise your project, and you must have the ability to control it. If you can't do those three things well, your project will have a problem. So let's look at the planning in more detail. The first thing is with planning, you must have clear processes for how you're going to do it, and make sure they're agreed by the stakeholders. Make sure your boss is happy with what you're doing. Make sure your project team understand what you're doing in terms of your processes. Budget contingencies. Who approves extra money in the project? How far does your approval go? Can you approve $1 million, $1 million baht? Can you approve 100 million baht? You have to be clear about where those approval processes are. Same with scheduling. When you set your plan up, you need to set up your plan in such a way that you've got buffers, what I call buffers in there, and your planning specialist will know what that means. Or you set your finish and start logic, or so that you've got opportunity on the track to run things in parallel, so you don't put everything into the schedule to run it absolutely as quick as you can. You've got to build some insurance in your schedule, so make sure that when you get the plans to do it, they can explain it to you. Because as the project manager, you have to make some decisions in the future about how you're going to get out of certain problems. Because they will come. But you must know when you originally plan the project, and your planning people that are doing the planning for you have built in sufficient contingency and insurance provisions in the project, in their plan. The last point I want to emphasise, I can't emphasise this enough, is that you have sufficient flexibility in your testing regime. Now that is, when the project's finished, how you're going to test and how you're going to accept what's being provided. So if you're on the owner's side, what are the criteria that you're looking for that project to achieve before you sign off and pay the rest of the money? You must make sure that you have sufficient flexibility in what you're looking at and acceptance criteria to cover changes that will certainly come during the life of your project. You must plan that at the start. There must be a clear relationship between your core requirements on a project and how you intend to test them. You must think about that way back at the very start of the project, often before you've even got people to give you good prices for whether they can do that project. You must be clear about how you intend to test the project at the end. I want to emphasise that again, I've seen a lot of projects get into trouble from these three areas. That's the source of major problems on very big projects. There's never been sufficient attention taken to these areas. Organising for change. First thing, within your own team, make sure people are absolutely clear about what they have to do, what their role is in the project. In your team, you understand what they're doing, and then you need to be able to tell them what you expect them to do and manage that on a daily basis. Keep in contact with them. My part, I know it's the modern technology. I'm not a big fan of emails. And to be candid, I forbid, when I run projects, I forbid my people that work for me to send emails to suppliers, contractors, anybody outside of me. It must be formal correspondence for a number of reasons. And I won't go through all of them, but it is absolutely critical on high-risk projects that I work on that there is a clear trail of documentation that you can find the stuff. Whatever the company is that you work in, they will have procedures for foreign documents. You'll have reference numbers on foreign documents. Extremely difficult to track that through email. You don't sit down and put down a document number on every email you send. A lot of emails are sent with emotional responses. If you print a letter, you have to get up and walk to the printer and get it off, and then sign it and read it before you send it out. You can change your emotion just by the simple fact of getting up. A lot simpler than that's a lot safer than sitting down and writing out an emotional email, hitting send, and then saying, "Oh, I've got to look at it and send it." And I don't let my project team on high-risk projects where there's a lot at stake to send emails outside. I know that's not the norm, but that's the way that particularly when I have to troubleshoot a project, that's one of the first things I do is make sure that any correspondence going out to contractors related to legal matters, contractual matters, is all clear letters. No. That doesn't mean to say you can't write the letter and then send it as a PDF. That's fine by email, but the letter must be written, must be signed, must be printed out, must be reviewed. None of this get the stuff in there, just type the email, hit the send button, and then say, "I wish they hadn't done it." And that I've seen causes a lot of problems on projects as well. The other things you need to consider, approval constraint, talked about that. Protocols. What are the protocols in your organisation, on your project, for managing changes? How does it come in? How's the change request raised? How's it approved? How's it assessed? What are the time periods? There is a lot involved in this, and you need to think it through clearly at the start of the project how you intend to do this. And make sure that the people that are working for you are clear about it as well. You cannot afford mistakes on this. Dispute resolution procedures. What are the steps? Who has the authority to resolve disputes? What are the processes? How do you raise a claim? What happens when the people are not happy about the claim? If these things aren't managed properly, it causes a lot of unnecessary problems on projects. I emphasise the word unnecessary. A lot of things that I've seen occur in the last 30 years could have been avoided very easily by being clear at the start of the contract about the steps in how you resolve things. You can't guess at this sort of stuff. It's project management. You must be clear. Problems will come on your project. That's the nature of what a project is. And you have to be able to deal with it. You need to know who to talk to get specialist technical support and also specialist legal support. You must know that. You can't know it all as a project manager. But when you need the advice, you need to know the best person you can go to and get that advice. And then you form a recommendation and go and talk to your superiors about it. But you must be able to get yourself in a position to respond quickly to whatever's going to come at you. And we talked just previously about the source of the changes. So changes can come from a lot of different areas, and some you won't even expect, but you need to know how you can get a system very quickly. It won't help you if it takes you 2 weeks to find someone to help you solve a problem, and the problem you didn't anticipate comes. You need to know those as early as you can. Controlling change. First thing is on the change, is it just an enhancement because an engineer wants to make it really good, or do you really need it to achieve the contractual performance? Emphasis on contractual performance. You're on a contract contract to deliver something. Make sure you're clear about what you have to deliver. You don't have time, resources, money to be doing enhancing things because it takes other resources to do that. If it's not necessary for the project, don't do it. But you have to be clear. You're the person making those decisions. Project control systems, earned value reports, baseline reviews. There's a number of things that you can do in there. Obviously, on a small project, if you're working on IT projects or small like that, you're not going to go these steps. But if you're working on something that's 100 million baht or 1 billion baht, you're going to be involved in these sort of things. Time bars for claims. You know, how long has the contractor got to put a claim in? How long have you got to respond to that claim? What are the processes? You need to be clear on how all this works. Communication is communication. The way that people are talking to your project is the way that you're responding to that communication appropriately. As the project manager, you have to deal, as Petra showed, you have to deal with, you're the centre of the universe in terms of communication. Make sure your communication is factual, is clear, is honest, is respectful, and time. Can't emphasise that enough. Don't respond with emotion, don't make quick decisions, but make sure that you're dealing with the facts. Early warning systems, there's a number of techniques, I don't have time in this short period to go through that, but there's a number of techniques that you can use. It doesn't take a lot of time, but you should develop shorthand. S-curves are great. Milestone management is another great technique that I use. One, when I had to troubleshoot a project, I go and look at key milestones in a project. Right there, I find them myself where critical phases of the project should have been finished, and then I look at what actually happened. And that gives you a very quick view. You can do it all on one page. Even a project that runs for 5 years has thousands and thousands of activities. As a skilled project manager or troubleshooter, you can put it all on one page and straight away you can see where the problems are. But it's important you're dealing with facts and not people's perceptions of what they think is happening. Big picture. You must be clear about what the project is all about, what you have to achieve, what are the key things that have to happen in that project. That's your job. It's nobody else's job. You have to have control over the project manager. Other people will be distracted. Now, the contractor's only interested in his part. Your people in your team are only interested in their particular areas of responsibility. People above you only want to know the good news. They don't want to hear the bad news. You're the person that has to have the big picture in mind. You have to manage it. Requirements. You must be clear about core requirements or derived requirements. I'll give you an example. Conveyor has to deliver 1,000 tonnes an hour. It's a lot of tonnes for coal. You know, I work in the resources industry. I don't really care. If I'm managing on the owner's side, I don't really care whether he puts a really big motor on it or a big gearbox or whatever. How he feeds. I just want 1,000 tonnes an hour. Now, a lot of people in contracts will say, well, I put a really big drive on it, it still doesn't work. I don't care. I want 1,000 tonnes an hour. But that's a core requirement. How the design has worked out, how wide it has to be, how many idlers you put on the conveyor belt, how big the drive is, that's a derived requirement. If they mess that up, it's not my problem. I just want 1,000 tonnes an hour. You have to be clear as project managers what the core requirement is on your projects to achieve all those performance requirements that will be tested at the end of the project. Don't get distracted by derived requirements. It's not your responsibility to do it. Make sure you're focused on the core requirements because that's what will be tested. Not all the other bits and pieces and people having arguments about I thought this and I thought that. Not interested in that. Look at the core requirement. Impact, and we'll talk about that. Okay. We're coming to a very important part now. Thailand is part of the Southeast Asian community. This part of the world is very dynamic, has a lot of different cultures in it, has a lot of projects coming into this area, a lot of infrastructure projects. The amount of infrastructure that has to come into this part of Asia over the next few years is enormous. And your ability to deal with changes on projects is absolutely critical. Your ability to manage those changes with cultural impacts is really important. So I'm adding to what Petra talked about earlier. So the first key message is this, is that different cultures, all cultures know how to have their own ways of dealing with conflicts. So because you're managing a particular situation, don't simply get an answer. don't assume that the conflict or the drama isn't being addressed. It's being addressed within their own cultural situation, what their experiences and how they've come up, how they've come through their childhood, their education, the situation they live in. But it's entirely different. My situation in Australia is completely different to what happens in America, completely different to what happens in Thailand, completely different to what happens in Japan, because we're all different. But you can never assume that the people aren't addressing the issues. As a project manager, you have to be able to manage the way that people deal with situations in America, from having people that work for you as Americans or Australians or Japanese or French. You have to be aware of it. You won't know all the answers because that's not your experience. Your experience if you're Thai is Thai. And I'll show you in a minute why that is so. But you need to be aware that people think differently, people feel differently, particularly in conflict situations. They feel uncomfortable. So as a project manager, you have to be able to create a safe environment so you can get to the facts of the problem very quickly and make the correct decisions. I'll emphasise that again. You need to get to the facts of the problem so that you can make the correct decisions to solve that problem. So the next important point is that, and this is from research, at the back of this presentation there's some recommended text. Number 5 is one that I recommend. If you're working on high-risk projects dealing with different cultures, the number 5, the 5th one that talks about conflict resolution in the Asia Pacific is by far the best. I use it regularly, and I recommend it to those of you that are dealing, working in those sort of high-risk environments. This is a really important message. It comes from another text. Is that the way that people deal with conflict is conditioned by, firstly, the structure of their language and environment they come from. So, because we're English speakers, and English language lends itself to be able to deal with things effectively in some way. Other languages don't work like that. French doesn't work the same as English does. The European language has got some similarities. Then you go to Chinese, you come to Thai, you go to Japanese. The language structures themselves don't lend themselves to achieve the same outcome. They're not the same one better or worse. I'm just saying they're different. But you need to be aware of how people feel. So it's not just they live in a different culture, it's also the way the language works. This is from the research in that number 7. And the last point is, even when you understand all this good stuff, people are different within their own same culture. So you're dealing with individuals trying to solve problems. So as a project manager, you have these 3 key areas dealing within cultural environments that you need to be able to manage. So it's not easy, but if you've taken these steps and you've done a bit of research, it'll help you enormously. I will just being able to ask the questions to understand how people feel. So for those of us that are not private, next slide I'll go through it. This is the background of how the Thai, in my view, from the research, how it's developed. So the key point in the first one is that back to the Sukhothai area. This tendency to accommodate others and to avoid conflict situations started several hundred years ago, and then it's been reinforced in the next period, and reinforced in this era. So there was influences that came from like the Khmer culture, then from the Indian culture, the Chinese culture, and lastly, this is the influence of the Western cultures in Thailand. So the people that aren't Thai, you need to be aware that you cannot change people's culture that's been occurring for the last 1,000 years just because we think we've got a better way to resolve conflict. It's not going to happen. You need to be aware if you're working in Thailand, how your Thai people that are working for you feel and why they feel the way they do. So how does that translate into how you can manage the Thai people? And this is what I try to use when I'm trying to solve problems with the athletes. So that's the high level of summary. More relevant to people who aren't Thai. Thai people know this already, but you need to be aware of it. The big things. The first, there's 3 things that I try to use when I'm working with my Thai athletes and Thai people. First thing is woman. Really important social value. So in managing conflict, Western people amongst us need to be aware this is the next thing is drinking dry. Enjoy. So if I translated that properly, close to the mark on what it should be. So some of this is 180 degrees different to how in Australia and America, for example, we would deal with situations. But you can't change the type of people. You have to be able to work with this and understand what they feel and what they see as important to solve problems of climate. I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong. You're working together in a multicultural environment, you have to achieve an answer. And the only way you achieve a solution to a problem is working with people. Doesn't matter how much technology you have in a contract. You can only solve challenges and conflicts on a project by people working together with people, by people communicating with each other, by people accepting each other, by people understanding each other. I cannot emphasize that enough. In a multicultural environment, that's really, really important. So we're in Thailand, so we need to understand how to solve problems in Thailand.
David, which one do you find most challenging to deal with?
I've had 6-7 years of, so I answer your question in a roundabout way. Just starting to understand bullying, I knew about green dry and JEM, but as an Australian trying to find a quick solution, sometimes I forget it. So all three are a challenge for me, but still learning. Does that answer the question? So my learning experience is still going up, but we've achieved some good results and I've got a lot of good friends as athletes in the sporting community in Thailand, so we've achieved some pretty exciting things together. But you never understand 100% because we come from a completely different culture in many ways. Some ways we're similar, but in many ways the Western culture is very, very different to the culture we know. But once you start to understand, sometimes it's frustrating because you want a quick result, but you realise it just takes time. Joe, again. Sometimes I'm not happy with it, but I have to do it. But if you take your time, you can achieve remarkable results with a guide people, but you just need to. And sometimes they have to come out of their comfort zone a little bit too. But it's a project manager. If you're working with, you're the person that has to understand where the other people are coming from. You still have to achieve what you've got to achieve on the project, but you can't do it by yourself. You have to work with the team that you've got. Did I answer the question? Integrating the control chain. How am I going? So a lot of this is standard stuff. I know I'm short on time, so ask me questions specifically if you're not sure of some of this, but I'll move on because I want to cover some of the big messages and not run out of time. So when you integrate change control, you've got a number of inputs that go into it. You need to consider. You've got things that you're going to do. Your requirements analysis, your technical analysis, that you'll need experts on probably what the top two. Schedule analysis, your own team can do that. Contract legal analysis, if you're not a lawyer, I'm an engineer, I've got a background in engineering and law, so I can do most of that myself, but maybe you need some specialists on that. Cost analysis, your team should do that. Meetings are really important. Make sure your meetings are focused. That's a completely separate lecture that I give on meetings. It takes about 3 hours, but make sure that your meetings are focused, you have a clear agenda, people are clear about what they have to do, who's responsible for it, and when they have to do that action by. So that's a very short lesson on letters. Make sure your letters are focused. And I've deliberately didn't put emails in there because I've already given you my views on emails. Use them very, very carefully. And the outcomes you're trying to achieve by integrating change control is, depending on the size of the project, how much you're doing these, but certainly you want to make sure, absolutely critical, that the change you make to your project can be tested within what that project has to deliver. Absolutely critical. Okay, it's well known in the project management environment that major reasons why projects run over time, why they cost too much, and even why they fail. So be very, very careful. Make sure you've got a clear process for managing changes, and make sure that you get the right advice and make the right decisions in a timely manner when you change. Introduces another level of uncertainty in the project. Depending on the scale of the change, you must make sure that both parties, the owner of the project and whoever's who has to put the change in, both agree to the change, not only the fact of the change, but the time required to do the change, the impact on the testing requirements, and the cost of the change. That is really, really important. It must be agreed. Right, now, a lot of problems in my experience, from a troubleshooting experience, working on very, very big projects, a lot of problems come from the tender documents and the contract documents not accurately reflecting what's required in the project. So, my rhetorical question is, your tender documents a recipe for disaster or a blueprint for success? You as the project manager, you're involved in an early part of the project and you're involved with the contract documents. Make sure, before you send them out for people to bid on, to give their best prices on, that it's a blueprint for success and not a recipe for disaster. It doesn't matter that your boss says, oh, it has to go out yesterday. If it's not ready to go out and doesn't cover the project properly, don't send it out, because it is a recipe for disaster and you will pay dearly for it in the future if you don't cover the project properly. Absolutely. This is, if there's a slide in this show that is most important, this is it. Drafting must be clear and concise with ambiguity. Because if you get this right, you minimise the amount of change on the project and the impact of the change, or future changes on the project. Because it's clear in the original document that went out for people to price how you intended to deal with it, what the project requirements were, so you don't have ambiguities in there. And when new things happen that you didn't expect, what come from the government or from insurance or wherever it comes from, there is a clear process for dealing with it, and for pricing, and for including it in your schedule, and for testing. Make sure you try to cover it. Okay, the English language lends itself, particularly legal English, lends itself to contracts. It's why the bidding people, anybody here use bidding contracts in their projects? It's used. Bidding contracts are used in 70 different countries in the world in a lot of different languages, a lot of different legal jurisdictions. Has been used for over just on 100 years now. So they've got a lot of experience. And on major projects with major risk growth, I would recommend using an appropriate form of bidding contract. It's based on English. They prefer the English version, but it has been used in Japanese and Chinese. I'm not sure about Thai. It's used in a number of, like German, French as well. When you're using English language contracts, try to go to this plain English contract, not lawyer special, bespoke contracts we call them, that have got a lot of legal jargon in them. The simpler it is, the easier it is to understand, and the easier it is to implement. The clearer it is, the better it is for you. So if you don't understand as a project manager, you can't expect other people that are working for you in contract and supplying you to understand it. So make sure you understand it before it goes out to people. Writing concisely is just a few tips here. I have a long lecture on this, but just a couple of slides out of it. So use the best and simplest description of what you want to achieve. You don't have to use a word like this. Lawyers love to use this. Just use that. It's simple. People understand that. This is the lawyer special. Just say the clause above, just nominate it. Clause 2.5 or whatever it is. Don't have to use all these funny words because it just introduces. It's confusing enough for me, and I'm a first language English language speaker. It must be a nightmare for people who are from Thailand, China, Japan, trying to read some of these documents and understand what they really have to deliver. And there's no need for it. It should be plain English. These are better words to use than those. This is simple to use than again another word speak. An active tense. I want to do something rather than this was done by this person. It's much simpler to say exactly what you want to do. So I've got through it. This book here, those who've got a highlighter of wire in their document. That number 5 is by far the best. All these are good books, but number 5 is by far the best book for managing conflict and understanding culture. So, any questions?
Thank you for the informative presentation.
You're welcome.
Just one question regarding the acceptance testing. You say we should have flexibility. Now it's a walking on a sword base, because unless you define your acceptance criteria upfront,
Yep.
it is a project management function that you sit down with customer and say, yeah, my product will meet this criteria.
Sure.
Is it meeting your expectations before startup?
Exactly.
So at the end of the project, when you are testing, I do not think it's a wise thing to get on the table and say, hey, is it okay, or you want something more?
No, that's not what I'm saying, Wade.
Right.
It's a very good question you asked. I'm not saying we intend to relax the requirement, but you might say, because a lot of testing, for example, has a 24-hour test. If a number of changes come in, you might want to sit with the owner of the project and say, this is a complex project. It might be advised to make sure that, all right, we want to run the plant continuously 24 hours, but because of the complexity, we might allow them to have 2 attempts before we go to the third one, if there's a problem. Okay, so what you're looking at is how you manage that actual acceptance testing in the time period. For example, before you apply penalties.
I understand your point.
Or you might what I call a honeymoon period. So on a particular project, if the project's really important, you have a bonus structure, you hit the dead date, and after that there's liquidated damages. You can put a honeymoon period. I've used this effectively on some of the projects, so I probably should have put a week in there or 2 weeks. Say, right, up to that date, coming this way, so doing right. Up to that date, you get bonuses. Here, it's a honeymoon period where nothing happens, and after that, we hit you with penalties after that because you're late. Now, that's what I'm talking about with flexibility for the testing project. You might want to play with that honeymoon period. And you can negotiate that between the contractor and the owner as you go through the project. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Tim, thanks for the presentation, very good presentation. My name is Kobe from Alpha. Just want to ask you, do you have any case in your experience that you have the project because of change of the scope and you cannot manage it and becomes a deadlock? Or you have any case that you think is very good to share with us how to solve the problem for the change of the scope you feel is very successful in your life?
So
To delay the launch.
Can talk about many. Just thinking of one. Okay, this is a good example to answer the question I think you asked. When I managed Australia's largest shipyard, which happens to be the largest shipyard in the Southern Hemisphere, it's one of the biggest in the world, we had a ship that came in for repair. Now, it had hull damage, so we had to put it into a dry dock and pump the water out. This dry dock can hold 2 ships. Behind it, we had a ship that had to go, this was a few years ago, had to go to the Persian Gulf to deal with the Iraq War, so it was a warship. So we had this commercial ship that came in, and we'd done all good pricing on it, and the job was worth $300,000. So, forget, translate what that is about, but 300,000 Australian dollars. We pumped the water out and it was a 2-week period. We pumped the water out and found the work was $3 million, 10 times the size. This warship still has to go to the Gulf in 2 weeks' time. So we had to do a scope 10 times the size in the same period of time. So as the project director, I had project manager working for me looking also looking after, I think, another, at that time, 15 other projects before us. We all had to share the same resource base. And we achieved it, but that involves a lot of pragmatic project management decisions about where resources go. And I can talk for a couple of hours about how we solve the problem, but that gives you the scale. We never knew the job was going to go from $340,000 to $3 million in time to scope in some period of time. An enormous challenge that my project manager worked for me didn't have. He was scared. He said, "Oh, we can't do this." My mum taught me when I was listening, no such word as can't in the English language. Don't use it. You have to find a way. So we sat with the planners and we worked out ways to do it. We had to run things in parallel and we did a number of things to achieve that type of one, because this warship had to go to the Gulf. It wasn't about liquidated damage or anything else. They had to replace a ship in the Gulf with this ship. Answer the question.
What were the key lessons learned?
Key lessons learned, right? Key lessons learned. First thing, deal with facts. Second thing, as a project manager or project director, if you're in a senior position, anybody who works for you must feel safe to come and talk to you. When I managed that shipyard, I was the second person in charge. I had 5,000 people working for me. I had an office, a very nice office. It wasn't in enough. I never locked the door once. The door was always open, whether I was there or not. And if people come and knocked on my door and I was busy, I'd say, "Come in," because they knew I was busy. But my view was, if they thought their problem was important enough, I stopped what I was doing and just spoke to them. People rang on the phone, put the phone to one side. If I'm in a meeting, I expect people not to have their mobile phone on. Because the mobile phone rings, they get priority over what you're talking about. That's not good enough. If one of your people comes to you on a project team with a major problem, you have to give them 100% attention and listen to what their problem is and then work with them to solve the problem. Okay? If you've got to tell them to come back in 5 minutes, that's fine. But never say, "Oh, I'm too busy, come and see me tomorrow." Because how do they feel? They've come to you for advice, for support. You have to address that. I cannot emphasise enough. It's not about sending emails. I'm not interested in emails. It's a serious problem, come and see me. If I'm talking to one, and this is a cultural thing in Australia, if I'm talking to a labourer on a job in that shipyard, and my boss came down from the board and wanted to talk to me, he would see me, I'd just say, "Wait a minute, because this person here is important who I'm talking to. It doesn't matter his rank in the organisation. This is the thing that's different in Australia. Everybody is the same. It doesn't matter whether he's the managing director of the company or he's a labourer that's working there. If he has a problem, he's talking to me. He gets the priority before anybody else. I can say really quick, I need to hear your problem quickly. You don't have half an hour for this. I've got 5 minutes I can give you, that's it. But they need, anybody who comes to you for a problem must, to solve a problem, need for assistance. You must treat them like they are worthy of your attention. I can't emphasise that enough. And I understand cultural differences and all that. But if you want your project team to feel important and to work well and effectively, you have to be the one that makes them feel important. So,
Thank you.
okay, any further questions?
In your slide for the organizing for change, you said that everything was informal, everything was written, right? But as far as my experience is concerned, it's not that always. Okay. So how do you deal with that when things are still a grey area and you need to deliver it?
Very good question. No project can cover everything. No project can cover everything. There are grey areas. But what you're trying to do is to minimise the grey areas. But I've worked on projects for nearly 40 years. And I've never found a project yet that has 100% certainty. Every project has grey areas. It doesn't matter how much experience you've got. You will always find the next project has something that you never expected. So you have to deal with it. And this is where the trust, people that work for you feel safe, they can come and raise a problem with you, and you can discuss the problem and have a solution. That you have to, projects only work if people are working with other people. It doesn't matter about how much technology is there. It will only work if people can communicate effectively with each other and work together to solve the problem. They can solve the problem with people working together. And then you document it where you need to.
Thank you. One more. You said about early warning systems, milestones and SCARs, right?
Yeah.
So, do you have some time now?
whiteboard. All right, let me go through a milestone scenario. If you're building a process plant, the simple process for a process plant is you have to clear the ground, you dig the foundations, you put the concrete in, you put the concrete down, you stand the steel structure, then you put your equipment in, you put your mechanical service in, put the cladding on, test it. So, and you can cover that with, you wouldn't get that on one page, you'd probably get it on about 10 pages, Microsoft Project or Prime or whatever software you use. One page, I'm not interested in going through 10 pages. I want to find what the problem is and I want to be able to track the progress. So I look for, when was the ground cleared? Milestone. So it's either all clear, ready to go, or it's not. So milestone is not about the duration or 10% or 20%. It's either 0 or 100. That's the first lesson in milestones. So when it's finished, it's clear. You can track that. You can see on your program that you had where it was, and then you get the actual date with actually finished. So I'm almost, well, it's not finished until it's all finished. All the concrete in the ground, right? Then it has to cure, and you can stand the steel structure. So concrete in the ground is one milestone. You might choose to put concrete curing in there as another milestone, but that depends on how you mix your concrete. All the structure erected is another milestone. Putting all the major equipment in is another milestone. Putting mechanical services in, all the firefighting systems, all the compressed air lines are in when it's finished. So you've done your pre-commissioning check, so you don't do the full acceptance, but you've done the pre-commissioning checks to make sure there's no leaks in there. It's finished. Electrical cable, all connected and terminated to the major equipment is another milestone. As a project manager, you need to have that sort of, you need to understand where that is. So a project that runs for 3-4 years, you can knock that down to maybe 200 milestones, 100 milestones, depending on how you want to do it. And you just map that. So you should have, if you're managing a long-term project, you need to know where you are at the end of every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks. Absolute maximum. Not a month, because a month is too long. You need to get yourself in a position where you can take the corrective action and ask the appropriate questions to get the project back on track. But just because it's a long-term thing, you think that you've got time to solve it. You don't have time to solve it because so many things are happening. You need to know where you are every 2 weeks. If the project's of a shorter nature, then it needs to be a week or maybe shorter than that. But you need to keep in mind too, people take time to come up with solutions and implement those solutions. So normally something shorter than 3 days is effective. Okay? But as a project manager, you need to know where your project is generally. Short-term project every week, long-term project every 2 weeks. Any other questions?
Can I ask you in the reverse question? Because today we're talking about the how to manage change, and your meaning is the negative effect to the project, right? So I ask you put in this way that if your project is in the trouble or in the crisis, how you create change to your project?
Well, the project
to rescue your project.
Oh, okay. So the first question, the first issue I want to say is
that's also the subject of managing troubled projects, which is at 1 o'clock. Okay, but so please go ahead and answer that. But I think Sumit has a lot on that topic. Go ahead.
okay. So the first thing is any change to the project should have a benefit to the project. That's the first reason to put it in. If you take over a troubled project and you need to put change in, that's a different thing. And you need to be, the first thing is you need to understand the facts of why the project is in trouble, not perceptions. And you've got to remember that when you go into a troubled project, when I go into a troubled project, people aren't feeling good. They've been on this project for 2-3 years. They've put their heart and soul in this project and it's about to fail. They don't feel good. Then they bring someone in that might come in and they've never seen me before. Straight away they start to worry, how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to pay my children? Because they think they're going to lose their job. Now I've been working in troubleshooting projects for the best part of 10-12 years. Very seldom have I sacked anybody, but I've changed a lot of people's jobs. And the supervisor out there, not really super, thinking better off being around. This is what I want you to do, be clear. And they have to know when you take over a troubled project and you have to achieve a result. You have to achieve a result every week. Two reasons. First reason is obviously you want the project to start to achieve something and get to where it needs to be. Second reason is the people involved in solving the project need to start to feel they get some wins. They're not having losses all the time, always bad news. They've got to start to achieve. So as a project manager, you have a troubled project. You have to be aware of how your project team is feeling. And sometimes you have to change people's roles and responsibilities. And I talked about that earlier in the presentation, that as a project manager, you have to be clear about what you want your people to do, and then you have to make sure they understand what they're doing. But if you don't know what they're doing, they're never going to achieve what they're doing. It can't be airy-fairy. It has to be absolutely specific. You are responsible for doing this, this, and this every week. Every month I expect this. Every 3 months I expect this. It has to be clear. And some of those, to answer your question on what change on a troubled project, that's one of the first things you have to change. If you take over a troubled project, often you have to change people's jobs. Don't always change the scope of the project, but you have to change people's jobs. There is change on a troubled project. There will be changes, and some of those changes will not be comfortable.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. I'm going to have to stop the Q&A here, but again, at the end of the session, we're going to have, we try to have 15 to 30 minutes where we'll have all the speakers sit down and just deal with questions that we have directly related to what's being discussed today. So thank you very much, Tim, for this presentation. I'd like to, what we're going to